the $1,000,000 question always is, okay, do deepfakes affect how people vote, right?
Yeah.
I think intuitively, a lot of us suspect that it might, but oftentimes it's hard to prove, right? Because
We need to do a survey.
Yeah, I mean, I know.
Welcome to Singapore Unpacked, a podcast series by the Institute of Policy Studies, Singapore. I'm your host, Liang Kaixin, Associate Director of IPS and also a former journalist. Today, we're diving into a timely and critical topic, artificial intelligence, AI, and elections. So with elections around the corner in many countries, including Singapore, concerns about AI's role in spreading misinformation, deepfakes, and polarizing content are skyrocketing. So how do we keep our democratic processes fair and informed in the age of AI? So to discuss this, I'm joined by Carol Soon, Associate Professor at the Department of Communications and New Media in NUS. And we also have Joel Lim, a media entrepreneur and content creator at Zyrup Media, who's also deeply familiar with the online landscape in Singapore. Welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks for having
us.
Okay, so Carol, you were my colleague. You were previously at IPS,
yes,
and you did a study on AI and elections. Can you tell us more about, what are the main concerns associated with AI and also how it will influence the election?
I think these 2 years are exciting years. We're talking about last year, 2024, and now 2025, simply because we see a coming together of two very significant phenomenon. One, elections, when people in different jurisdictions are going to the polls and casting their ballot for whom they want to govern their lives, and at least for the next few years. And also that alongside with the very rapid advancements we are seeing in tech, in particular AI technology. So based on the research that my colleague Samantha and I did, which we looked at elections in 2024, we see many possibilities of how AI can contribute to elections in a productive manner. Whenever I talk about tech, understandably, there's a lot of concerns, and sometimes tech is used as the boogeyman. But I think it's also quite first important to also have in mind, what are some of the advantages of tech, right? So clearly, AI, in the instance of elections, can help with productivity and efficiency. But that said, I think the fears, the anxiety surrounding AI and elections are not unfounded. There are potential pitfalls. One of the key pitfalls is the hallucinations.
Okay.
We know how LLMs are trained, right? Essentially, they are trained based on what's out there.
Large language models, right?
Yes, large language models, yeah. And they're trained based on what's out there. Mm-hmm. And what's out there comprises of truths, facts, statistics, but there's also a lot of misinformation and disinformation. And unfortunately, like most things, it's rubbish in, rubbish out. So one of the key considerations when thinking about how AI can be used, whether it's by political candidates themselves or citizens who are interested to use AI to search for information and do some quick and dirty research on parties, everyone should be mindful of the problem of false information, hallucinations. So a study that was done last year in the context of the US elections showed that among the answers that were returned by 5 large language models, almost half were inaccurate information or information that was made up. I think that's one key concern that we should be mindful of.
Okay, so do people actually really ask ChatGPT and all that to ask them whether who should I vote for? Do you think so?
Well, I don't think, well, there's no guarantee that people won't use ChatGPT in such a way.
Okay, sure.
But I think in general, when people use ChatGPT and other generative AI tools, typically it's to help them find some information, right? They could be asking a generative AI tool like ChatGPT on, what does this particular party stand for? What are some of the different positions that have been expressed by so-and-so candidate? And the kind of responses that are returned to them would be quite significant. right?
Okay. Yeah. So Joel, do you think people actually do that also?
Yeah, so maybe I can speak from my perspective as a user of generative AI.
Yeah.
We're talking about LLMs, and I use ChatGPT Pro. I use
You paid money for
yeah,
it.
I paid $20 a month. And then I use DeepSeek, and then I use Gemini from Google as well. And I really do enjoy that process of using AI to help me understand things better. And I maybe don't really ask questions like who should I vote for, but what I actually do ask is, for example, with the US elections, there are a lot of issues where people are on two sides of a debate, right? And I think because it's sometimes the topics are so intense and so big to be able to digest, what I really want to understand in a very nugget format is what are each side arguing about or arguing for, right? And I want to know what are the different opinions that are being shared and the different arguments that are being presented. And I think AI is able to explain that to me. So what I try to use AI for, or really utilize the ability of AI to help summarize things, is really just being able to present information that is out there that they can just consolidate versus telling me like hard facts, So I think it's just more so like broad strokes. And then I will, with that understanding as a baseline, I'll do my own research and I'll do my own readings. From the different publications. So yeah, in a way, I do use AI to understand topics better. But not in a sense of like, tell me who like I should vote for.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Carol, besides LLMs and all these generative AI, right? I think a lot of people are even more concerned about deepfakes, right? People who make videos out of existing footages and putting words into the candidate's mouth, right? So what are the key examples that we have seen out there in the world?
So if we look just last year, US elections that has, basically changed everybody's lives, right, including you and me in Singapore. We saw a couple of examples here. One of the most known example is the deepfake audio, the President Biden's robocall, right? It was produced with a tool at about USD $150. And just 2 days leading to the primaries in New Hampshire, it actually was, it reached thousands of people. So that is one example. And I listened to the robocall myself.
Okay.
And it really, really does sound, I would say, exactly like Biden. Unless you really, really scrutinize, and not just scrutinize, but also make an effort to fact check, like look at media reports. Did Biden make such an announcement, for instance? Most people would be taken in by the robocall. So that is one example, right? And then again, in the US examples, unfortunately, there are other instances as well. So for instance, generated content of Kamala Harris criticizing Biden and his declining mental faculties. So there are quite a couple of examples. Then, of course, we know of, in the case of Indonesia, the quote-unquote resurrection of one of the earlier presidents of Indonesia, Suharto, right? So these are some of the various examples, the more visible ones that we have seen. Of course, there are less prominent ones. But one thing to note is that the use of AI in elections really is not just limited to producing deep fakes, right? And sometimes tools, LLMs like AI, are in the foreground, but AI also exists in the background in the forms of algorithm that micro targets users of technology. And one implication of that, which we should also think about, is how people are further entrenched in the echo chambers that they find themselves, because they are just fed information that already appeal to their pre-existing values and beliefs.
Okay. So Joe, then do you see these kind of deepfake videos? Do you come across them, and also like Do you think people are actually fooled by these videos?
I mean, one of the more prominent pieces that came out during the US elections was the Taylor Swift incident,
Oh, right.
whereby like Donald Trump, I think he shared on his platform Truth Social in a series of images whereby they depicted Swifties for Trump, and one of the images was an AI generated image of Taylor pointing at the camera and saying, "Taylor wants you to vote for Trump." And then he reposted that and said, "I accept." And, I think that actually became a huge topic of conversation because she herself came forward and said that inspired her to then, clarify things. And actually from there on,
She
endorse
came out to say that she's endorsing
Kamala.
Harris instead, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that I think, was quite of like a seismic shift in terms of like, how pop culture and the US politics like conflate and overlap. And for me it's like I did see that, and actually something that Taylor wrote in her caption was that incident raised her concerns about AI, and in a way I totally understand where she's coming from, because like if it grays everything so much, because something like Trump, and he did later on say, well, I didn't generate those images, right? I was just sharing them.
Just denying, right?
Yeah, like I didn't share, I didn't create them, I didn't generate them, I was just sharing them. So then you can't really, like, does that mean we can't fault him? It really raises a lot of new questions that come about, right? And I think Taylor was right in that, there are fears when it comes to generated AI content and elections, right? Because they will have very real impact, because like what Dr. Carroll said, a lot of it really depends on whether or not the individual is willing to take the effort to check whether or not it's real, right? And a lot of the times, like just the nature of using social media is that it's a tap and scroll mechanism. You don't want to spend too much time on a single post. Unlike a podcast whereby you're spending so many hours, but all these things are being shared on a very quick consume platform. So a lot of the times people don't actually, take the time to double check and fact check. Yeah.
I think, Joel, you raised an important point about the potential impact of deepfakes on elections. And, the $1 million question always is, okay, do deepfakes affect how people vote, right?
Yeah.
I think intuitively, a lot of us suspect that it might, but oftentimes it's hard to prove, right? Because
we need to do a survey.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is the OCD part of me being a researcher, right? You want to say something, you want to draw a conclusion, let's do the research and collect the data and let's design the study. But we're talking about a very real world phenomenon. How people decide to vote. Clearly, of course, their social media use, their consumption of different news media would influence the kind of information that they come into contact with, right? Then they would clearly process that information and hopefully process information from different angles and help them make an informed decision. But that is the ideal world. And we know in today's world, given the avalanche of information, especially with the intrusion of poor quality information, it makes voters' job even harder, right? But how we vote is not, number one, not just limited to what we see on social media. It's also a lot of other things. It is also dependent on our political preferences, our ideological values, how we feel about bread and butter issues. Unless we cluster people up and just feed them deepfakes, at the end of the day, we don't really know and we can't say for certain, okay, it did have this kind of impact on how they voted. But I can say how deepfakes can influence the electoral landscape. Number one, I think linked to my earlier point about the problem of hallucinations. Like what you said, it really grays many things. So what it means is that it can actually give rise to a lot of confusion, right? And people don't know what to believe, what not to believe. And it might actually create a fair bit of not just skepticism, but distrust or worse, apathy. And that's when we have people withdrawing from the public space. And that's not what we want for a democratic process, right? And of course, the other thing is sometimes deepfakes those that go viral, they can shift the discussions and maybe shift the public discourse in a way that moves away from issues that people should seriously be thinking about. So, for example, in the Indonesian context, President Prabowo Subianto, he used technology, and then his campaign created and put content of him that portrayed him as a cute and cuddly grandfather figure, which is really quite different from his persona, right, as a military authority. And so people's attention for that time was shifted towards that. Instead of discussing, issues like the economy, how well the economy is doing, etc. So these are other types of impact that we might see of generated deepfakes and other AI-generated content on the electoral landscape.
But Carol, I was reading your paper. I think there's also one issue you said in the paper that there's one example is that, this is a deepfake, I didn't say it. Or you could have said it, the candidate could have said it and said that, it wasn't me.
So it's what we call, or actually what some observers and academics who have written about the topic, they call that the liar's dividend. Essentially, when politicians or candidates falsely claim that content is not genuine, when in actual fact, the content is genuine. So they do that in a bid to shirk responsibility and not take accountability for whatever embarrassing speech they have made or action that they have committed.
So they can just wave it off, right?
Yeah, and blame it on deepfake.
Okay. That's a good move.
Yeah, a scary one too, actually. Because I don't know, I think in the past, when you're embroiled in scandal, you're like, you have to be accountable and you have to then course correct, right? And like change your approach to winning back the trust of the audience. But with the ability to say, actually I just think that's not me, that's deepfake.
It wasn't me.
Like pun not intended, but it's a trump card, right? That you can just play, Yeah.
Yeah, but okay, so then moving back to Singapore, since we're going to have the general election coming here quite soon. So I think Singapore was also quite concerned about AI and its impact, right? So there was a bill that was actually passed, the New Elections Integrity of Online Advertising Amendment Act, right? So maybe Carol, can you just briefly tell us what is this act about and how will it help us guard against misinformation and disinformation?
You're right. I think this act was passed in anticipation of potential use of AI-generated and AI-manipulated content during the election. So, but interestingly, this act is actually very, very specific and very targeted in its scope, right? So, what does it act against? Essentially, it empowers candidates to lodge reports with the returning officer who can then make an investigation and take the necessary action against AI-generated or manipulated content that misrepresent a candidate. In fact, it is not just AI-generated or AI-manipulated content, but it also applies to other digitally manipulated content. So, for example, the use of Photoshop, slicing, and dubbing, right? But I thought it was quite targeted because it is meant at enabling candidates with a way to take action against false content that is created of them that misrepresents them, right? It's also targeted in another way in terms of the duration at which such actions can be taken. So unlike the Protection from Online Falsehoods Act, POFMA, this act will actually empower the authorities to take the necessary action during election time, meaning between the issuance of the writ and the end of polling.
So it's just a very short period of time.
It's short time frame. It is meant for very specific purpose. It is also quite clear in what it will target and what it will not target.
But I find it very interesting because it is only targeted at candidates. So the candidates have to like go and declare, right, that they are going to stand in the election.
Well, according to the Act, it's not just the candidates who can lodge a report, but members of the public can as well.
Oh, you and I also.
Yes, yes. So if if you come across digitally manipulated content about candidate ABC, we can actually lodge a report with the authorities as well.
So what's the penalty for whoever who created the content?
2 possible action, one of which is requiring the publisher, the content creator, to remove the content, failing which I think that the authorities will be empowered to get the online communication service to disable access so that the content won't be accessible by people in Singapore, users in Singapore.
But it does require, people to be quite proactive, right, to flag this kind of content. I mean, Joe, what do you think about this act? I mean, any observations and all?
Singaporeans love to complain.
So you think people will go and complain?
I think they probably will, especially when you have, when it comes to politics, you have people who support, certain candidates or certain parties. They are supporters. If let's say they see something that puts their person or party in a bad light, they'll probably be eager to shut it down, especially if it's false. So I don't think it won't be utilized. I think it will be utilized by the people as well. But yeah, I thought it was quite interesting just to see like how they'll be able to also identify the content creators, because sometimes it's all these anonymous pages that will create also. So I'm quite interested to see how they will track them down.
IP address.
Yeah, I don't know actually, but like, yeah, I think that's one of the scary parts, right? Like you just sometimes don't know how to track down these anonymous accounts. Yeah, like even if you have like POHA, right? POHA, like the personal one.
Oh,
yes, harassment act.
Harassment
like
act,
if it's like a anonymous account, like how do you even go about identifying who that person is so that you can protect yourself against from them? I haven't given it much thought actually. So
But actually, right now in Singapore, we do see some videos of our political office holders. Their videos are being manipulated, right, to use for, I don't know, advertising of crypto or Bitcoin or scams also, right? So I think there is a likelihood, right, that
possibly
this can be
certainly.
manipulated.
I mean, it's both possible and plausible, right? Yeah.
And I think with that also, like, I mean, when you speak about scams, a lot of the people who come up with the scam mechanics are actually not based in Singapore, which also introduces the idea of like, what if like foreign bad actors want to come in and influence our elections with AI content? I don't like does
from a
does
certain
that,
country.
yeah like does the bill help protect us from that? I actually don't know, and I think it's worth exploring and worth thinking about.
So I think when they were tabling the bill and they were discussing it, discussed in Parliament, I think really the plan is for the Act to be used, if necessary, in conjunction with other regulations to
such
enable,
as POFMA and FICA, right?
To enable the authorities to take the appropriate actions against the offending material and the offenders.
Yeah, but the challenge will be definitely because in Singapore's context, our election usually happens very quickly and ends very quickly, right? So how do you manage the fast flow of information and go after people who are, creating all this content, right?
I actually really like the feature on X, Twitter, formerly Twitter, like where they have like community notes, and like because on the platform, sometimes like the misinformation is really just wild because anyone can just say whatever they want. And like community notes just allow for people in the community to just clarify certain facts or details.
But user generated, right?
I
Because they have
don't
cut all their
think
trust and safety
so.
stuff.
Yeah, I think don't
Yes.
don't really know, but I've seen like the notes reflecting facts. So I actually don't know how it works, but like I mean, I'm not really endorsing X right now because I'm like it's kind of like a dumpster fire. But
Okay.
for me, it's more like a feature like that. I think will help in the future, whereby whatever platform it is, if users of a community or a certain platform want to challenge a particular thought, like they too can contribute to that. Yeah. So.
So Carol, then like what Joel said, right? What are some things that tech companies can do to help to stop this kind of like AI enabled misinformation?
I think what we're observing are actions taken at different levels, one of which is at the quote-unquote prevention level, right? So in the context of technologies like ChatGPT, etc. So some of the tech platforms and companies have actually started directing users to authoritative sources when they type in queries and type in their prompts in those chatbots, right?
Okay.
So that's one. I think in the last US election, Meta actually rejected requests by users to generate images of candidates.
Oh, okay.
So that's another measure. And we also see some measures taken at increasing the provenance. That means making it clear and transparent who's behind the production or generation of that audio, video, and image. So, for example, YouTube and TikTok require their users to label AI-generated content.
Okay,
right? So
that's very
this
useful.
is to enhance the transparency of where the content comes from, who's behind the production of that content. So these are some of the measures that are being taken by tech platforms. And of course, YouTube, for instance, as well as a couple of other platforms, have also taken to removing channels
Okay.
or accounts of users who disseminate and produce AI-generated information to sway voter registration, etc.
Oh, okay. And of course, AI can also be used to fight against AI also, right? To detect against this kind of manipulation, right?
Yes, so I mean, AI tools can also be trained to help users, civil society actors, as well as journalists and editors who work in newsrooms detect AI.
Okay, that's very useful. So, but Joe, then what do you think, like as a consumer yourself, or maybe even a content creator, like when you are creating content, to what extent do you make use of AI for your work actually? And do you think like is there some line that cannot be crossed? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I think I always, and this is going to be like a whole other topic on its own, but I think when it comes to the creative community, I think there are two different camps, right? People who
Okay.
say we are against AI, and then
Okay.
people who are
We need to
like,
protect our copyright, right?
correct. And then there is a community that is entirely for AI and is excited by AI.
Oh, okay.
I fall into the latter group, just because I see the efficiency of work being produced by using AI as a tool. And I think the key phrase here is as a tool.
Okay.
It's not really a replacement. I think one, there's an important need to be able to understand like what does responsible use of AI in content creation look like and how you can incorporate it into your workflow. So for me, I think it's more so for the creative process of bouncing off ideas. So in the past, I would have my own creative ideas, let's say creative idea A, right? And my creative process would be to go to my colleague on the left of my table or a friend and over coffee and I say, I have this idea, what do you think about it, right? And then they'll give me their opinions. So to me, AI platforms, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Gemini, they've now become that friend, whereby I
Your
ask them,
imaginary friend.
yeah, basically, like I ask them, hey, like I'm doing this, like what are your thoughts? Sometimes the replies I entirely disagree with. Sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, they kind of spotted some blind spots that I never did think about, and that to me is just kind of like a bouncing off of ideas, right? And then I go back to my workflow and then I refine my work from there. Does that mean that what I produce is entirely AI generated? It's not. It's just using it as a tool.
Okay.
And that's what I mean by using it as a tool versus a replacement. Because I think what makes a content creator successful is also their point of view and their tone and their personality, right? The reason why people would follow personalities or content creators today is because they offer a certain something that your news outlets might not be able to.
Authenticity?
Could be, or just relatability.
Okay.
And I think that when you use AI as a full replacement of that, you lose that personality, you use that point of view, you lose that perspective and the vantage point that you as an individual would have. And I'm very clear when it comes to using AI for that. And I've seen the kind of content that AI can generate. And I'm like,
there are funny videos, right, that are like quite cute, or like even, we do see a lot of humor that's out there, like maybe a cat cutting vegetables, or
I see that actually.
Right?
Yeah.
But those are very funny. But maybe does it sensitize us to AI content in a way, or it's just harmless fun?
It really depends on the context in which we are presented the information. I think today, if let's say I'm going to be, recording a podcast episode or creating an explainer carousel infographic, and it's entirely AI generated, I think my audience will be able to know that, hey, that's not really you.
But I tried. So I tried to put in the prompts and then hey, can you help me generate a podcast? And then they actually came out with, you can choose which accent you want, British accent or American accent. Yeah, so the product actually, it sounds quite, I wouldn't say it's a full product. Sometimes they will do is that really? And then they will say, laughs. But the product actually, I think just give it a few more, 1 or 2 years, it'll be quite mature actually.
Yeah.
And it can replace us.
No, I'm not saying that it's not great or it won't become even better. And I think it's quite, to me, it's actually very exciting that that's happening, right? Because for me, in that use case, I will totally use it as a mock-up of how I want the episode to go, right? But I think when it comes to real human conversations like what we're having right now, it's like, this is not scripted. We didn't prepare our answers for this. We didn't.
Are you sure?
I didn't get the questions before this interview. So what I'm saying is just what comes out. And I think that, more and more as we enter this world of AI generated content, more and more we'll want to have very real human content as well. Flaws. Even I think the blemishes actually make something more realistic, and people will actually, I believe, lean towards that kind of content too. Yeah, which is also why I feel like sometimes when people look at certain politicians, they're like, I don't really like them. Yeah, because they are so polished and
Okay.
And more people are liking the straight shooters. The people who are maybe less polished. I think it's kind of a reflection to where we are in society today as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then Carol, AI can also be used as a tool for the candidates, right? In a way.
Yeah, like what Joel mentioned, I thought it was extremely interesting to hear how he, as a content creator, uses AI to, just generate preliminary ideas, even in a way as a sounding board of sorts to bounce off ideas, help you improve your content, for instance. Likewise, in the context of elections, AI can be used to do some of these things, right? It can help politicians, say, draft emails, speeches, at least come up with the first cut. And it will be immensely remiss of any politician, like a content creator, to just take what comes from the AI tool as the final product without, number one, checking, right? Number two, refining it so that it sounds like it is his voice, and also injecting his own personal experiences and maybe other contexts. So, so helping, politicians to do the more laborious things of maybe drafting emails, texts, etc. That could be it. It can help then free up some of their time to do more high-touch kind of activities, right?
Like shaking hands, kissing
walking the
babies.
ground, talking to their constituents in person. So these are some of the potential usage and advantages of tech tools.
But then, of course, we were discussing about all the content out there, right? So, what can we do more to help the public be more aware about, AI-generated misinformation, and also improve their media literacy?
I sit on the Media Literacy Council, and certainly it's one of the things that keeps us up a fair bit. But
Awake at night.
Yeah, personally, as a tech user, as a researcher, and as someone who cares deeply about improving people's media and digital literacy, I have come to the realization that in the area of tech, things change very, very fast. Right? We were just talking about, how to help people navigate social media, and now we're talking about helping them to discern what is a deep fake. But that said, I think there's some comfort to be taken that there are certain constants. Mm-hmm. So what do I mean by that? I think in terms of the approach, right, to empowering users, improving their digital literacy and their competency to tell, say, for the purpose of this discussion, a deep fake, from something that's genuine. One is to focus on what, like equip them with the basic knowledge. Like, for example, how do you tell if something is a deep fake? Mm-hmm. What other signs should you look out for? Look at the speaker's face or body. Is the person moving too much, too little? So these are examples of the what to focus on.
But it's very difficult, I'm sure everyone has the group chat with your elderly parents or relatives who keep sending us like fake videos. And, for us, it's like when you see, it's like, this is definitely fake. But you don't really know how to explain that, hey, this is fake, Yeah.
Yeah. It takes time. It takes effort, right? And I think which is why, and it's not just the government agencies who are doing it, but also certain social service agencies who are taking up the mantle and coming up with quote-unquote classes or activities that can expose people to potential deepfakes and to kind of teach them how to recognize some of these things. So in a way, while we should do our part, we alone do not bear the quote-unquote full burden, right? Okay. That's one, teaching people what to look out for. The other thing is, after you tell people what to look out for, I think it's also important to tell them how do they go about verifying that information, right? So don't just stop at what to look out for and how do you recognize something, but how do you go about verifying it? Maybe in the area of verifying images and ascertaining the authenticity of the image. Simple way would be maybe doing a reverse image search on Google. Yeah. So I think that makes it more manageable, because you don't just tell people that, okay, this is fake. Look out for this, but hey, what tools can you use to help you? So I think that's important too. And then finally, I think it boils down to human habits that we really need to remind people of. Unfortunately, we live in this tech world where everything moves so fast. We're hit by so much information, good and bad, from all angles and from so many different sources. So we're so guilty of, relying on what Daniel Kahneman calls system one thinking. Okay, right? As opposed to system two thinking. Okay. So system one thinking is when we make fast decisions. And typically then they're very intuitive and they're likely to be, biased, right? When in fact, we should make slower decisions, take our time to make decisions and to consider an issue. That those efforts call for greater intentionality and deliberateness. Very hard to do, but it's not difficult to do if we remind ourselves
to slow down,
slow down, Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
I mean, something I want to add is also, I think people at the end of the day are able to curate their feeds. You're able to see, you're able to choose who you follow, and you're able to flag out content that you don't like or do not want to see. Yeah, you can mute, you can hide, you can tell the platform, I'm not interested in this creator. I think I wouldn't know how to put a guideline for everyone to follow, but I can share my own personal guideline. And that is really to be able to curate my following list of people who I trust and have developed that trust over a long period of time. So I've consistently seen, their work, what they post, whether or not they hold themselves to a higher standard of posting factual information or, thoughtful information when it comes to topics like politics, for example, because my following list has reality TV, has like music, has pop culture, and then there's like those like news platforms and politics. And when it comes to those particular topics, I'm really, really stringent on who I follow. And I feel like if the moment someone like betrays that trust, with kind of like maybe sharing false information or whatnot, my quota is quite high for them to be able to reestablish that trust with me. One thing that I want to note is that the rules have changed from 10 years ago, because in the past, how I would be on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter would be, if I see that a platform or a creator has the blue check mark, that means they're legitimate or they are, someone somewhat trustworthy.
Verified, right?
Yeah, verified basically. And the blue check mark used to mean a thing, right? But somehow, somewhere, it got monetized, You can pay for the check mark now on Instagram. I have the blue check mark as well. On Instagram. And on Twitter, you can pay for that as well. And I've seen on Twitter, like parody or satire accounts having the blue check mark. So today, what is that blue check mark? The meaning entirely shifts. Because on Instagram, a lot of creators like myself want the blue check mark, not for the verification, but more so for creator support.
Creator support.
Yes. So for example, if you meet certain issues, when you pay for the blue check mark on Instagram, you're able to get direct access to creator support from the platform. Otherwise, you would usually only have a FAQ page that they have curated for you. So a lot of creators need that, because sometimes we just meet platform issues, right? On Twitter, I don't really know what it means anymore, actually.
Anyone can pay for it.
Yeah. So for me, it's just more so understanding that, hey, the rules of 10 years ago don't apply today when it comes to verified accounts. So what does that mean, for us as consumers, right? Like, does that mean that, we have to look at the content that they post, their track record, right? There are some, like, in the Marvel universe of consumers, right? There are some people who leak content and they consistently leak false news. Like for example, they go like, this actor is going to be cast as this superhero, and then it turns out not to be true. And then there are leakers who say I have 4 sources, like consistently giving out leaks that are legitimate. And then within the community, they have certain reputations and whatnot.
Of course.
Obviously, like for me, it's just more applying that same concept here, whereby the creators you follow now, you have to look at their consistency, their track record. Have they been producing quality, content? Have they been correct in their, the things that they share? And then as a follower of theirs, you get to decide, okay, are they trustworthy or not? Yeah.
But I just wanted to ask also, like, is there a difference for platforms? Because like you mentioned, there's Facebook and Instagram, which are a bit older. And right now there's more TikTok and, all the short videos that are very, very fast moving. Does this actually help to move information faster and also even spread misinformation into the wider extent.
100%. Like I think all the platforms that we mentioned, you know, like TikTok, Instagram, X, they prioritize quick consumption of content, right, or information, and it's so fast for something to go viral.
Yeah.
You know, the algorithm picks up that the audience is interacting and engaging, and they push it to wider audiences. You know, maybe even before anyone can step in to say, "Hey, actually, that's dangerous or that's wrong," right? The algorithm does that, and I think to answer your question, absolutely, it changes the game. You know, like once a core audience is interacting or engaging with a piece of content, more people will immediately see it as well. Once algorithm picks it up,
Yeah, I mean the whole thing about making a product or a service easy to use for the users would be making it, in the case of social media platforms, frictionless, right? You want their experience on the platform, their interactions with the profile and interactions with other users to be as smooth and as easy as possible, right? So that's essentially how the entire online experience is designed to be. And unfortunately, this lack of friction also means that people can spread information very quickly.
Yeah.
In fact, too easily, right? So that's the upside and also the downside.
I think we have we raise a lot of issues and problems and also, right? And so Carol, what else can tech companies do to, you know, stop such AI enabled disinformation?
I think increasingly we on the point of platforms, right? Clearly a lot more needs to be done.
Okay.
You know, we talk to platforms quite a fair bit, and clearly they are making a lot of efforts. They are coming under quite intense spotlight in various jurisdictions who are coming out with regulations that places greater responsibility on digital intermediaries, which include the social media platforms that we have been talking about, but also game services, etc. Right? Well, what we are seeing in recent months is not exactly encouraging. You know, Meta's latest policy or lack thereof with regards to fact-checking, essentially wanting to scrape fact-checking to allow for, quote-unquote, greater freedom of speech. To me, that's worrying.
And also the layoffs, right, of trust and safety teams,
correct,
right?
because I think what we are seeing requires for the greater practice of safety by design, right?
Okay.
When we talk about safety by design, essentially what it means is that when companies build products and services, they should put user rights and user safety at the core of the development. It sounds simple. It sounds like an easy principle to apply, but in order to really do that, you need to put in place a whole slew of processes and mechanism from the very beginning, before you even conceptualize and design the product, to after you roll out the product. And that requires time, money, and manpower. So the cutting back of trust and safety teams that we are seeing is indeed something that all of us should be concerned about.
Okay, because the companies may not be incentivized to take down misinformation, disinformation quickly, right? I mean, maybe even to them it's better for them, you know, because they get more eyeballs, right?
And I think taking down problematic content is only one part of the picture.
Okay.
If we want to talk about, say, safety by design, right? At the very beginning, when companies draft, say, policies for users, right? You know, we have an account, without reading, we usually just say, I agree.
Just, I agree.
Okay, but
please use my data.
They actually do have a responsibility to develop user-friendly policies that are clear and easy to understand. And how can they do that? Sometimes not only just by themselves, they can actually take into consideration, say, user research or inputs from the user community, or even in consultations, done in consultations with experts and academics. So this is just one other thing that companies can do to protect user safety and rights.
If you have one power, okay, what will you choose to help to stop such information from influencing our election? I'll go to Joel first.
Oh, that's a huge question for me to take first. Wait, can we repeat the question? If I have one power, what would I do to stop AI from negatively
influencing our election? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just the gift of knowledge, right? Just giving everybody the ability to be able to discern. And, we're talking about how, like, to gain that ability, it's a lot of hard work and a lot of steps to go through and a lot of hurdles to jump over. Like, if I had a superpower, it's just like everybody gets that ability, yeah.
Okay, and I think my superpower will complement Joel's superpower, which is to get everybody to slow down or slow down time so that they can better recognize problematic content more effectively and quickly. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Carol and Joel, for joining us for today's episode. Yeah, thank you for
having us.
Yay. If you enjoyed this episode, do follow or subscribe to the show, leave a rating, or share it with someone who cares about Singapore's future as much as you do. Thank you all for listening. See you on the next episode of Singapore Unpacked.